Welcome in, everybody, to the reveal of the number 17 team in my 2022 NFL Power Rankings with a deep dive into the Philadelphia Eagles. Before we get started, please do me a huge favor and hit that like button down below. It's free, it's easy, and it's a huge way to support my channel, this series, and this video. Also, if you enjoy the video, make sure you subscribe. Turn on notifications so you do not miss any of these deep dive team previews as we lead up to the number one team in my rankings. But the Philadelphia Eagles, entering year 2 of the Nick Sirianni era, looking to repeat as playoff contenders and potentially go beyond that and compete in the NFC East that was a little bit out of reach last season, and a massive offseason here that they're hoping can improve this team so that they can take those strides. And I've got to give a tip of the cap to Howie Roseman, the general manager here, who to me is just at the top of his game right now, a guy that I have always respected. And when he struggled a little bit, I stood here on this channel and said, just hang on, Eagles fans, let him bounce back. I know the Rieger pick, the J.J. Arcega-Whiteside pick, not the picks most of us would have made, let's just put it that way, but he bounced back really well, and this offseason here to me is a great example of that, as now we sit here and this Eagles roster, quarterback excluded, is genuinely one of the best in the league. And they have 2 first-round picks next year because of the way they've navigated the draft trade market. So love what Howie's done. Love what he did this offseason as we take a look at the key departures and the key additions here. Honestly, most of these key departures I debated even putting on here in the first place because you have Brandon Brooks, who played a game and then missed his season last year. He retires, rightfully so, just could not stay healthy. Nate Herbig stepped in and played really well as a backup guard about half the season, so I did put him in there because guys that played a lot of snaps I like to put in there, but they cut him. Like, they have so many players at guard, and they're getting Isaac Seumalo back, so hardly a loss there. Ryan Kerrigan was signed because they lost Brandon Graham, veteran edge that did play about, a third of their snaps last year. Hassan Ridgeway was a rotational defensive tackle. They had no interest in bringing him back. They draft Jordan Davis in the first round. Alex Singleton, decent against the run, but very redundant with the linebacker TJ Edwards, who they have. So they go and get some athletes at the position. Kaiser White, Nakobe Dean, again, an upgrade there. Gennard Avery did play about 400 snaps. He's kind of a linebacker, sub-package pass rusher type. Well, they go and get the best in the business for that role in Hassan Reddick. The true losses here are going to be Steven Nelson at corner. Yes, a loss, but they replace him, landing James Bradbury, stealing him from the New York Giants because they mismanaged their cap so badly. Not someone that would typically be getting cut, so they upgrade at corner there, most likely. And then Rodney McLeod is the one true loss that I look at their offseason and say they actually probably got a little bit worse there, though it's not guaranteed because Rodney McLeod didn't have his best year last year and is getting up there in age. So, man, the key departures is basically a wash. And then you look at the key additions. We mentioned a lot of the guys they already added, but you sprinkle in upgrades in the wide receiver room, getting A.J. Brown, easily a top 10 receiver, probably closer to 5 than 10. They get Zach Pascal to be a 4th receiver here, someone that has been very consistent for the Colts. You get some more offensive linemen in there. We mentioned Seumalo, but they draft Cam Jurgens to be the long-term replacement at center. Edge being upgraded, Brandon Graham, Hassan Reddick. Interior defensive line, Jordan Davis. Linebacker, we mentioned these guys, Kaiser White, Nakobe Dean, James Bradbury, like massive upgrades across the board on the defense. And they throw in Jaquiski Tart, who I'm not a huge fan of, but we'll talk about if he's even going to start later on in the video when we go through this roster. But I will say, a lot of Eagles fans are going to say, well, they won 9 games last year, they went to the playoffs, and you say they have this spectacular offseason. How are you ranking them 17th, kind of on the outside looking in, as far as not being a top 14 team when 14 teams make the playoffs? And you have to be realistic about what this team actually accomplished last year. Now, they definitely were a surprise team. I had them ranked 29th coming into the year, and I was higher by a couple spots than most people had them. So, yes, Sirianni did a great job in year one, and this team accomplished a lot of stuff that is building optimism, and here they are 17th, climbing up 12 spots from last year, going into the year at least. But come on, man, let's look at what they actually did here. They win 9 games last year. 8 of those 9 wins were against teams that ended up picking in the top 11 of the draft. The one win that they had that wasn't against one of those teams was against the New Orleans Saints, who had a 9-8 record by season's end, were a game under 500 when they played them, and in that game they were missing both starting tackles, Alvin Kamara, and they were starting Trevor Siemian. That was not exactly a winning football team that they beat. So they got the opposite of a murderer's row in terms of their schedule, and they lost to every single good team that they played, including another loss to the New York Giants, 13-7. So yes, they did some really nice stuff last year. Yes, I think they are a much better football team this year, but they have a long way to go just to get back to being a real 9-win team when, I shouldn't have to explain why winning 9 games with those wins is not particularly impressive. It's possibly the least impressive playoff resume that I can remember. And Eagles fans are going to be mad about it, but it's a reality here. So let's move on and talk a little bit more about the coaching staff here and what this team is going to look like schematically. So Nick Sirianni entering year 2, someone that I do think, even though the schedule was easy, did a really damn good job with this team, getting them into the playoffs. And this is a coach that was mocked by a lot of people for kind of a gimmicky and even looking nervous in his opening press conference. And he got this team together. And one thing I really like about Nick Sirianni is that he adjusted to his personnel as the year went on, and they were not as good of a team in the start of the season as they were by the second half, because he had acknowledged, okay, Jalen Hurts' strengths, running the football, offensive line, run game, let's run the football. And early on, he tried to run his kind of spread coast Andy Reid offense that's typically very pass heavy, but he adjusted, leaned into his staff and his scheme, and put together a different looking scheme than what he wanted to run coming into the year. And that adaptability is very commendable. So I still think he has a lot to prove. Again, I don't take their 9-win season last year all that seriously, especially when they looked like such a nightmare offensively against the Bucs in the playoffs. I do only rank him 27th right now, but that is very much trending up, and I do think he has a lot of opportunities here to continue climbing those head coach rankings. I do like what he does on the offensive side of the ball. I rank them 20th for pass game and 13th for run game, where I actually think between him and Shane Steichen, they really did build a creative run game that leveraged a lot of their player skill sets well. So I do like this offensive staff. They are just a little bit unproven, still young, but overall pretty good. And a little bit more schematically here with these guys between Sirianni and Shane Steichen. Both of these guys have a lot of experience working under some of the more modern passing game designers in the NFL from the early 2020s. Guys like Todd Haley for Nick Sirianni, Mike McCoy, where both of these guys were there for the Chargers in the 2014, 2015, and beyond. And then Nick Sirianni goes and learns under Frank Reich, who was, as I mentioned, in that Andy Reid coaching tree there, that spread coast style, and Ken Wisenhunt as well, kind of an early innovator in the modern passing game as well. So all of these guys come from that modern West Coast spread style where they prefer to live in shotgun, execute horizontal passing games, quick game, and have a bit of a run game through the air, if you will, with easy, quick reads. And good run after catch threats at receiver as well. runs typically are inside zone, out of shotgun. They'll integrate the read option if they have a quarterback who can do so. And that's pretty much what we saw schematically in the passing game for the Eagles last year, with some added elements of creativity in the run game where they, again, were pretty dang good. So no issue with the scheme here. And I'm excited as well to see now that they have a little bit more weaponry on the offensive side of the ball, what they can do with some of these guys, especially like A.J. Brown. But defensively, my optimism stops. I'm just going to be honest here. Jonathan Gannon was incredibly underwhelming to me. And just schematically speaking, it felt like watching a 12-year-old play Madden, where he's just spamming base nickel defense and cover 3, cover 2, mix in a little bit of cover 6, cover 4, but very, very minimal creativity, both as far as disguising coverages on the back end. And we saw them come out against Tom Brady twice, and he was just like, okay, cover 3, hit that seam, cover 2, check it underneath there in the little slot. Like, so easy to read pre-snap and post-snap. And these quarterbacks are too smart these days. You can't consistently get away with it, and it hurts his players on the field because, as we'll see later in this video, I do think the roster here is much better than, well, I would just say they deserve much better than what they got last year. And it's not just the coverage, it is scheming up pressure up front. And maybe the signing of Hassan Reddick will lead to some more creativity. I don't know. They didn't really do a whole lot with a guy like Jannard Avery, who's in the same skill set, even if Reddick is a lot better. They don't do a lot of stunts. They don't blitz like at all. It was infuriating watching this defense. And I know we got head coach interviews, but he didn't get any of those jobs. Man, he's got everything to prove to me. I know he worked under Mike Zimmer, he worked under Matt Eberflus, but this was a lame-ass scheme last year, and if they do it again, I honestly think this team will fall short of the playoffs because they're going to play real quarterbacks that are just going to pick them apart, and all the good quarterbacks they played beat them. So I don't like his coaching style. I think he has everything to prove, and he ranks 31st in the league for me. It's just a tough reality. He needs to prove that he can coach in the NFL to me. But moving on, we are going to start going through this roster. We're going to start with the offense, where this team ranks pretty well. 15th in the passing game and 6th in run game. All that said, my other major area of skepticism with this team, we talked about the schedule, we talked about the defensive coaching, quarterback is a major question mark for me. And I'm just going to be honest with how I feel about Jalen Hurts. I've watched a lot of coaches' film on him. I've prepped this opinion quite a lot, and I don't think he's the guy. Now, I do believe he's taken massive steps year by year by year, going all the way back to his time in Alabama. The problem is he's getting better from literally being effectively a running back when he was winning a national championship at Alabama. And you've seen incremental improvements, but there's still some major issues with Jalen Hurts' game. But let's talk about his strengths first and then his weaknesses. He ranks 28th for me in the league. He obviously provides a ton of value in the run game. And we're going to look at him as a runner. I'll just show it right now. They rank 3rd for a QB run multiplier, and that's a huge weapon for this offense. It's a big reason this offense picked up in the second half of the year. He had, almost 1,000 rushing yards, like 10 touchdowns on the ground. He did cough up 10 fumbles. Got to clean that up too. But that's a legitimate impact, and the beauty of me being able to do this split the way I do is that's a massive boost to this team's overall, what he adds in the run game. But the beauty of me kind of splitting this up a little bit is it allows me to really pinpoint what his impact is on the passing game. And I don't like his impact on the passing game. Now, there's a lot of good stuff to say about Jalen Hurts. I had a day 3 grade on him. I never thought he'd be a top 32 quarterback in the NFL, and I think he currently is. I love that he's improved his accuracy. He's able to push the ball downfield with much more consistency now. And I think he's playing slightly better in structure. His time to throw has gone down. His turnover-worthy play percentage when he throws the ball has gone down. He has made incremental improvements, and there's no denying that he wants it, and he's working at it, and that's all there. So maybe he continues to climb, but he still has so far to go. I mentioned that time to throw percentage. Yes, it's gone down, but he's still dead last in the league in time to throw, which means he's holding onto the ball. He is passing up correct reads to run around and do what he does best and go for those big time throws and be that kind of headhunter of a quarterback that's looking for big plays. And it just leads to an erratic, wildly inconsistent, and so oftentimes predictable quarterback inside the pocket. And I'm not just saying this, like, he is infuriating as far as he is the definition of a first read and run quarterback. Like, I'm going to show you just a couple of clips. This is just from 2 games of capturing footage on him, but it is week after week after week, and it was no different in his playoff game against Tampa Bay. So this has not gotten any better. He is going to look at that first read. If it's not there, he's running whether the pressure's getting in or not. And not only does that mean he's leaving a ton of meat on the bones, not looking at secondary receivers. It's a big part of why a guy like Devontae Smith isn't getting the production that is equal to his route running ability, because oftentimes he is the second read, he is winning, he is getting open, but Jalen Hurts doesn't look his way. Or that applies to Quez Watkins as that alert on the backside post or something like that. Hurts just doesn't see that stuff. So he's leaving meat on the bones by not scanning the field from the pocket. But beyond that, you started to see teams like the Giants and Tampa Bay in the playoff game basically run a contain rush, drop 7-8 guys into coverage, and cover up the first read, and wait for Jalen Hurts to scramble and go get him. And there was a lot of ugly moments in those games. The other problem is, while he has started to take better care of the football, his turnover-worthy play percentage is still really poor. Top 10 in both percentage and total turnover-worthy plays last year. It's a guy that started every game and threw for 3,300 yards, 17 touchdowns, 11 picks if you want a statistical viewpoint on it. He just has still so far to go. And it's impossible for me to go back and watch this Eagles team and say they were quarterbacked well. They had a guy that was a little bit better than you, was a lot better than I expected, but just a bottom 5 starter in the league. And as we look forward, it's just so hard to win with that. Now, he has improved and he may continue to improve, but how much? Because while he's getting better, they're incremental improvements, right? This isn't like Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson where they're taking these giant leaps from year to year. He's just getting incrementally better. And how long do you want to sit around for him to be the 18th best quarterback in the league when you have 2 first-round picks next year? Big year for Jalen Hurts. I don't disagree with kind of giving him another year, especially with the way the last year's quarterback class was, but I have some very serious doubts that he's going to be a guy that can get them to Super Bowls. I think he can be good enough this year to get them in the playoffs, though. I actually rank Gardner Minshew as the backup, like right behind him. I think Minshew is a much better, just true passer. But you got to factor in Hurts can create those big plays. He does use his legs as a scrambler, so that makes him a better overall quarterback. But just playing from the pocket, I don't think you can even argue that Gardner Minshew is a worse quarterback. He's clearly better to me, but I'm also a fan of Gardner Minshew's game. So you at least have depth there. If something happens to Jalen Hurts, you plug Minshew in, and I think a comparable quarterback play. Eagles fans won't like that, but I honestly have these guys pretty damn close. But I also think Gardner Minshew should be a starter in the league because he gets the same grade as guys like Mariota and Drew Lock, some other guys we've talked about. So it's more about me liking Gardner Minshew there. I also really like Carson Strong. Got to talk about him because when I made my quarterbacks video in January, he was actually my number 1 QB. I honestly thought his tape was the best out of all of these quarterbacks. Now, that's not saying much. Only one of those guys went in the first round, none in the second. But what became clearer as we led up to the draft is that his knees they are literally deteriorating. And he needed a major surgery to prevent that and get it back to 100%. And that's clearly something the NFL is terrified of because he didn't even get drafted. I think if he can fully recover from surgery and take a redshirt year, I'll just say this. This is the perfect spot for Carson Strong because he doesn't need to play this year, and he could potentially come into a team that needs a quarterback next year that has a great offensive line and great receivers, and he is more of a pocket guy. So I'm a big fan of Carson Strong. I'll be pulling for him. He's an undrafted quarterback, so there's no guarantee that he ever plays, but I liked his tape quite a bit. And I guess you can go check out my QB video if you want to see a little bit more about the things I liked about Carson Strong. So certainly an interesting quarterback conversation. And the beauty is these guys are surrounded by, can we say an elite group of weapons here? They rank 4th for me in the league. The A.J. Brown acquisition speaks for itself. There's very little to say about A.J. Brown. He's a true alpha. He's one of the most aggressive, physical receivers in the league, and someone that, for Jalen Hurts, he can be that reliable, just go win me a ball on 3rd down type of guy, because that's really not Devonta Smith's game. And I love the way these two guys play off of each other. But Hurts really leaned into Dallas Goedert in kind of a pinch on 3rd down, and now he's got 2 of those guys. So he should only help in those kind of playmaking situations, but he'll also help making sure that first read is open. So again, A.J. Brown speaks for himself. One of the best run after catch receivers in the league. Probably the hardest receiver to tackle, I guess, behind Debo. He's insane. And to get him for a 1st-round pick, it was a no-brainer for the Philadelphia Eagles. And they didn't even really need to do this because you have Devonta Smith on this team. You also have Dallas Goedert. Like, they were in pretty good shape, and now they're in great shape. And Devonta Smith's tape was phenomenal. He was everything he was at Alabama. That guy that did he win the Heisman? I can't remember. He won the Heisman, right, as a receiver. But all of the same ways that he was able to dominate in college were there on film. The route running, the run after catch, the incredible field awareness and instincts, whether it's after the catch or to sit down in zones or manipulate his body to win contested catches. This dude's slender. He's like 180 pounds, but you wouldn't think so based on the plays he makes. And again, it was not a passing game that was super conducive to a wide receiver blowing up, but I watched Devonta Smith and I say he's a really freaking good receiver that was picked, 11th in the draft? Like, he is that dude. And if the quarterback play is good, I think he's only going to continue to climb. And the fact that he's a number 2 is true luxury. And I can't picture a much better 3rd to pair with those guys than just a true deep threat, because both A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith are best in the short to intermediate game. Both can win as a deep threat and will at times, but you can just send Quez Watkins deep on a post and a go ball, and defenses have to, be honest about that and then back off, because he can win in those ways. And he's been a pleasant surprise as a 6th-round pick with real speed, and his ball skills have shown to be better than expected. So he's kind of the perfect role with the way the rest of this group of weapons is crafted, and I love complementary skill sets, and they've got it in their receivers. And then you have Dallas Goedert, who also makes sense as a true wide tight end, a ball winner, a good route runner, excellent after the catch, a great run blocker. Dallas Goedert, to me, is right there, either the 5th or 6th best tight end in the league, depending on how you want to jump on Kyle Pitts. And the term baby Gronk gets overused, but honestly, Dallas Goedert's film is pretty dang close to Gronk. Like, I think his consistency with his hands is a little bit less, and he doesn't have that, chemistry with a Hall of Fame quarterback in Tom Brady that helps inflate his stats a little bit. But man, he's got the size, the run after catch. He's a good blocker like Gronk was. Like, it's really not that far off of a comparison. So he had a monster year last year, and I love Dallas Goedert. He's a true weapon for this team. and honestly a little bit underrated, I think, right now. But then with these running backs, I do list Miles Sanders as the primary receiving back, but it's going to be about an even split. And I think it's actually going to be better when Kenneth Gainwell is in. And it's not that I don't like Miles Sanders as a receiving back. He's an athlete. He's a decent route runner, decent hands, decent after the catch, and the speed definitely helps him run away from guys in space. So like he's a contributor in the receiving game, but I really like Kenneth Gainwell. I compared him to Austin Eckler coming out, and he was basically Austin Eckler immediately as a rookie, especially in the receiving game. Now, the volume wasn't always there because they do use Miles Sanders and they do use Boston Scott, and he didn't get on the field immediately. They even had Jordan Howard in the mix, muddying things up a little bit. But gosh, he is a guy that played some receiver in college, I honestly think already a top 10 route runner with smooth, easy hands, transitions easily after the catch, and ultra elusive and instinctive after the catch, and a great athlete. Like, what else can you ask for from a receiving back? I think he can be one of the 3 to 5 best receiving backs in the league this year, and honestly think they should just lean into him on third downs, because in a moment we'll talk about these guys as runners of the football, but he's functional in that part of the game too. So I really do think he's just Austin Eckler and just a little bit less proven in that regard. But you throw him out there and you have 4 guys in the stud tier for me, with the 2 studs trending upwards with star potential, and the other 2 guys are stars. So like you can't really get any better than that, honestly, especially when they all have complementary skill sets as they do. So I love this group of weapons, and honestly could end the year ranked first if Jalen Hurts takes some Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson-esque leap and allows those guys to reach their potential. We do need to talk about some more of the depth here. So I love the Zach Pascal addition, just a tough, gritty receiver. I think he will get some early down work because of what he does as a run blocker, but a reliable pair of hands, just a limited athlete, not a great separator. You have Greg Ward, who's a truly functional slot receiver, and he'll get out there for some of your, more bigger down and distance situations where he can operate from the slot, former quarterback who can sit down in zones and has had a nice little career. You've got Jalen Reagor here, who's a sunk cost at this point. They'll give him an opportunity to compete for kick returning duties where he coughed the ball up in a playoff game, and they're just done with him, honestly. He's obviously a bust, like that's not controversial to say, but now it's like, is he even going to make this team? It's pretty crazy how bad he is. He doesn't run efficient routes. He doesn't win contested catches. He drops the ball, like it's not reliable to put the ball in his hands. So he's basically useless for this team at this point, but he might edge out guys like John Hightower, Deion Kane for that 6th wide receiver spot, and not a ton of notable undrafted wide receiver guys here. Britton Covey was a really good return man though for Utah, and if Reagor doesn't, impress the coaching staff with his ability to secure kicks and punts, you might see Britton Covey make it over Jalen Reagor. I don't think this team keeps 7 because of how many running backs they have and how many tight ends they have. But needless to say, it's a sweet group of wide receivers. The tight ends, Jack Stoll, this is part of why I love doing the draft, man. Jack Stoll was a complete my guy. I don't think anybody was onto this guy. Didn't even really play his final year, but tested well. I had to go back to his 2019 tape when he was coming out last year and found that he was just a dominant blocker, was effective in the receiving game when they used him, was on my sleepers list, my guys list, my top 10 tight ends list. They pick him up as an undrafted tight end, and he's their tight end too almost immediately. Granted, got a little help from a Richard Rodgers injury, but he was a good blocker. He played his role as a tight end too in 12 personnel, and for a team that ran the ball a lot down the stretch, he did exactly what I saw from him as a sleeper tight end. And he's got athleticism and upside as a receiving guy if used more. But just got to toot my own horn a little bit on Jack Stoll, who is the tight end 2 here. They do draft Grant Calcaterra, who's a different skill set, a smaller kind of receiving tight end. And we've seen in Indianapolis, of course, this staff has those Indianapolis ties with Sirianni coming over from learning under Frank Reich. they love 12 personnel and 13 personnel, oftentimes with kind of the hybrid type of tight end receiver. It was Trey Burton. They drafted Kylan Granson for that role. That's Grant Calcaterra. Probably never going to be a full-on starter. He just doesn't have the size to be a wide tight end, and you got Dallas Goedert here. But I do think he'll steal some reps in his rookie season from Jack Stoll and play probably a little bit more of a role as a receiver. It's a guy that does run good routes and at a point in time was a high-end tight end prospect, but concussions forced him to retire. He decided he loved football too much and decided to come back. So I like that pick. And he makes perfect sense with the rest of these tight ends. It's a tip of the cap to Howie Roseman because he always builds complementary skill sets, and that's no different with the tight end room as it is with these receivers. Richard Rodgers might stick around as kind of a rotational tight end, steady pair of hands, has improved his blocking over time. I don't know if he'll for sure make the team, though. Kind of depends, honestly, on, I would say, what these project guys show. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside making the conversion, and Whiteside might steal Grant Calcaterra's role that we described earlier because he is literally a wide receiver gaining weight and moving to tight end. Tyree Jackson, a former quarterback, trying to go the Logan Thomas route. I don't see it from him. Always thought he was incredibly stiff, and I don't think he has the movement ability to be a skill player, but it's a deep tight end room, but also at the same time, no one you're like excited about stepping in if something happened to Dallas Goedert, which is fine. Tough to have that kind of depth at tight end. And then at running back, you've got most of your snaps already discussed here with Sanders and Gainwell. Boston Scott will get maybe 10, 15% of the snaps, and he's a scat back type. He's shifty and decent in the receiving game. I honestly don't think Jason Huntley makes it because he is so redundant with those two guys ahead of him, Scott and Gainwell, all of them kind of smaller, speedy scat back types. Kennedy Brick's a decent undrafted pickup, and I would say if something happened to Miles Sanders, he might get some added playing time as a guy that was productive at Oklahoma and would be their only guy with some size if something happened to Miles Sanders. So that's why I think they probably go with Brooks over Jason Huntley or pick someone else up, maybe bring Jordan Howard back or something like that. But a sick group of weapons, ranking fourth, honestly, with the potential to be the best group of weapons in the entire league with ample development for some guys. Then the running back room, when we talk a little bit more about the run game, they do rank 23rd there. I'm not a huge Miles Sanders guy. The explosiveness is evident, and he's got the size, and he's not a bad runner, but he just hasn't taken that next step. Oftentimes, I am scratching my head with some of the lanes he chooses as far as his vision. And again, broken tackles, missed tackles forced. He's never really towards the top of the league there. And I don't say this often, but I think the Eagles would really benefit from actually having one of those top 10 running backs because they have such good blocking. To have a guy that could consistently capitalize on these well-blocked runs paired with Jalen Hurts' running ability, you could see them elevate to being a Baltimore-esque, Cleveland Browns-esque run game where it's a week-to-week dominant force. It's good. It ranks 8th, but I do think the running backs hold them back a little bit. Miles Sanders is a big part of that. And Kenneth Gainwell, you're not going to fault him. I mean, he's best as an Austin Eckler in a third down role, but he plays at about 200 pounds. So you're not going to ask him to be this great between the tackles runner. But out of the shotgun, he's got actually pretty good vision. He's tough. He'll fight for like a yard if he's close, but not running through a lot of arm tackles or pushing upfield as a between the tackles runner. Behind him, Boston Scott, incredibly redundant with Kenneth Gainwell, but they're both very similar players. I don't think Scott's quite as explosive, but was pretty efficient last year, and honestly was a little more efficient than Miles Sanders, so they will use all of these guys, and I mentioned how Brooks would get some playing time due to his size if something happened to Miles Sanders. And I do like that their scheme does a really good job, not just utilizing these guys as receiving threats, but getting them in space. It's not a true wide zone blocking scheme, but with all these athletes they have on their offensive line who we're about to talk about, they do a good job kind of running sweeps and different creative runs, read options as well, and spread formations that buy these guys space where their kind of inability to be power backs is sheltered, and their speed and ability to make guys miss in space is capitalized on. So they do use these guys well in their own kind of unique run scheme. We really already talked about Jalen Hurts and what he does as a runner. He ranks third in the league for QB run game multiplier. And before we start talking about the line, these skill players are really freaking good at blocking. I've mentioned Dallas Goedert. He's, I don't know, a top 10 blocking tight end. He's got plenty of size. He's really good at it. Jack Stoll looked good in his rookie year, was good at it at Nebraska. A.J. Brown, it doesn't always give it 100%, but when he does, he's going to delete you. And Devonta Smith's like the opposite. He's a total tryhard at 180 pounds. And then I gotta count Zach Pascal, because I do think he plays a decent amount of snaps on early downs, and he's legitimately one of the best run blocking receivers in the league. So outside of like Quez Watkins, whose speed allows him to just be a runoff threat as a quote unquote run blocker, this is a really good group of skill players alone. And then you put an offensive line like this in front of everything we've talked about, it's where you start to maybe entertain the idea that the Eagles are actually the best offensive roster in the NFL. I don't think that's crazy. This is the best offensive line in the league to me. They rank first for pass blocking, second for run blocking. They were fourth for weaponry. Like this is a special roster that Howie's put together, and there's no excuses for Jalen Hurts at this point. But from left to right, you got Jordan Mailata, who another just great job by Howie Roseman to extend him when they did. He had started 1 year as a 7th round pick. I mean, just to find him in the first place, but to acknowledge that his growth on the practice field was real and that he was due for a massive leap forward, to extend him for what at the time looked like a slight overpay, but now it's one of the most team-friendly deals in the league. I think it's 3 years, $40 million for Mailata. That's like half the price of what he should demand on the open market right now. So, I mean, he emerged as probably a top 10 left tackle-ish. There's a lot of good left tackles, but man, he's trending upwards. He's a physical specimen. He's got length. He's improved his foot speed, although that's the one area that I would say he's still kind of working on, his technique and ability to drive backwards out of his stance and get depth. I think speed is where he's still... I don't think he struggles against it, but it's where he's still figuring out how to consistently beat speed rushers. But as a run blocker, I mean, he's dominant and only getting better. Size, get off, tenacity, you name it. So you got Jordan Mailata at left, only getting better. Landon Dickerson in year 2, to me, should have been a first-round pick, but some health concerns didn't show up in his rookie season. He's good to go, and the drafting of Cam Jurgens kind of signals that they like Dickerson at guard, and I don't blame them. I mentioned how they kind of do creative ways to get these speed backs out in space with their scheme. It's by having some crazy athletic center that can pull wide in either direction and on these screens as well. So putting Dickerson at guard in this system makes sense. And he's a guy with just size and beef, and he can help a guy like Jason Kelce or Cam Jurgens down the road, who is a more smaller guy. So when they run duo or they run inside zone, you're getting a little bit of that drive ability from Landon Dickerson. It's very similar with Seumalo at right guard. And then you're allowing Dickerson, or again, Seumalo, to be the guy that sticks on a double team, takes over the block, where you see Jason Kelce come off and climb to the second level. So again, complementary skill sets. The team building here is just beautiful. Dickerson is improving as a pass protector. Wasn't a true strength for him coming out of Alabama. Just the foot speed, ability to react to quickness. It's just something that maybe will never be elite for him, but it's adequate. So an ascending quality left guard there in year 2. Jason Kelce, I think at this point is kind of putting the last touches on a Hall of Fame career, in my opinion. He's won a Super Bowl. He's been a part of some really special offenses, and he's just such an iconic center because he moves like a freaking tight end. He's incredibly athletic. He still is. His ability to climb and pull and find guys in space on screens, it's just elite doesn't even do it justice. It's legendary. Pass protection has never been, I would just say, elite for him, and it's gotten a little bit worse as he's gotten older. I think his true anchor and core strength has reduced, so it's nice to have some bigger bodied guys next to him where you can shelter him in pass pro a little bit, but still really quick and good technique, so he's good in pass pro. And then Seumalo hopefully coming back at right guard. Not a great athlete, but rocked up dude with great grip strength and a good drive blocker, similarly to what we said about Dickerson. So he's a very solid right guard. And then we haven't even talked about Lane Johnson yet, who's, I would just say, a top 3 right tackle right now, and still one of the best athletes among that group. Former tight end, another guy that is just lethal on lead blocks and screen blocks. His get-off allows him to get leverage quickly in the run game, and someone that has really improved his technique throughout the years and is just as stable now as he's ever been as a pass protector. So another star on this offensive line on the right side there. And what's just absurd about this offensive line, as if I haven't talked nicely enough about it, is they almost have a full starting unit among just their depth. Like, they're one player short, I would say, of having a backup offensive line that might not even rank 32nd in the league. Just think about that for a second. Because you have, to me, 2 good backup tackles in Andre Dillard and Jack Driscoll. Dillard was a first-round pick. He would start for half the teams in the league at either tackle spot. Maybe that's a little bit of a stretch, but they don't like to trade these guys off. They don't like to release these guys. Like, they kept Isaac Seumalo here for a reason. A lot of people thought he would have been gone last year, but he's still here because they love offensive linemen here, clearly. There's no clear route for Andre Dillard to play. He's not a guy with a ton of play strength and probably shouldn't be a guard, but to have him as a backup tackle is a cheat code. And then Jack Driscoll, currently listed at tackle, but started a lot of games at guard last year. And I do fully expect, if Seumalo goes down, which is not a large if, he's missed significant playing time the last 2 years, you'll see that red cross next to him. So you don't even expect him to be out there, but it hardly matters because Jack Driscoll was a sleeper for me when he came out, and someone with excellent pass protection technique, who I do think has added some nice play strength after being asked to play guard. He would be one of the best swing tackles in the league for anybody, and he's not even their best backup tackle. Then you have Sua Opita, who started like 6 games for them last year, basically a young Isaac Seumalo. Kind of choppy feet, not the best pass protector, but a rocked up dude who can just use his play strength to his best advantage. I think they have good depth there. He came in and they didn't really miss a beat. And then they draft Cam Jurgens in the 2nd round, who, granted, is incredibly raw. And if they took him to start in the 2nd round, I would have been critical of that pick. But his athletic upside and ability for him to be a clear heir apparent to Jason Kelce as a lighter, ultra-athletic center. He's even maybe more athletic than Jason Kelce. His off the field or pads off drills, he looked like a linebacker moving around. So he's going to develop at center, and some teams have starting centers of similar caliber to Cam Jurgens, honestly. So you run 4 deep, that's 9 notable offensive linemen here. And shit, Jack Anderson played pretty good in a meaningless Week 18 game against the Cowboys last year. So you might have 5 deep there, and I liked him as a prospect for a day 3 guy. You even have LaRaven Clark, who's played some games in this league, some good undrafted pickups like Jared Williams, Josh Sills, William Dunkel. I don't think it's a debate. This is the best offensive line in football. And if you couldn't tell, it gets me pretty fired up. So what do you get when you combine possibly the best offensive roster in the league with one of the worst quarterbacks? About what you expect. The middling offense, 16th in the league. It's definitely the biggest polarization as far as roster talent compared to quarterback, which means there is immense pressure on Jalen Hurts to become a better passer than he's been. And if he doesn't do that, I do think the Eagles would be right to look to the trade market, look into the draft, and you might end up with a top 5 offense with this offensive unit. And most of these guys aren't going anywhere other than like Jason Kelsey, who you just drafted an easy replacement for. So this offense is sick, and let's just see what Jalen Hurts can do, right? But now let's talk about Jonathan Gannon's defense, starting with the pass defense, where they rank 19th in the league, which is lower than each individual position ranking. I like this roster. The coaching to me is the biggest concern for this defense. It's vanilla, it's easy to read, and I clearly think it holds this roster back. And they've got to mix things up. They've got to get more creative, or it could be a shortcoming of this team. But the talent's there. Pass rush ranks 9th for me. It's a bit of a motley crew with a ton of depth. A lot of pieces to talk about here. Let's start on the edge. So leading in edge snaps, I think it will be Josh Sweat, of course, who led the team last year, and Hassan Reddick, who they signed from Carolina. And I really like Josh Sweat. Really athletic dude, a little bit lanky, not a ton of power, but he can convert some speed to power. And he really wins with his hands and his speed and his bend. And he took a nice step last year. I don't know how much better he's going to get. He could get a little bit better than I'm ranking him here at an 80. But I think that's about what he is and what he's going to be, which is what he's paid as. And that's how he produced last year. And that is a good number 2 caliber rusher. Then opposite of him, again, there's going to be a lot of rotation here, but Hassan Reddick gets brought in here for 3 years, $15 million a year. And it's not that I think he's bad. I rank him as a good starter, productive sack guy, offers a lot for a creative defense on stunts and ability to scheme him up sacks and pressures. But his true ability to win as a one-on-one pass rusher does not equate to his payday, his pay grade, or his sack totals. So again, his speed and his bend and ability to kind of navigate different pressure looks on stunts and to shoot through gaps that are schemed open is elite, because he is 235 pounds. He's an insane athlete. The Cardinals, after they drafted him, weren't even sure if he was an edge rusher or a linebacker. But in true one-on-one pass rush situations, not only does it not show on film, but it's backed by the analytics. In true pass rush situations, he was 48th in the league in pressures last year and 54th in the league in pass rush win rates. So that's a lot closer to someone like Derek Barnett, or even worse. But you do have to factor in what he's able to do with his physical presence and the threat of his speed off the edge. You have to get a hand on this guy, or he's going to sack your quarterback very quickly. So that is a weapon. It's just an overrated weapon based on how much weight people put on that sack total, that he always ends up in double-digit sacks. Here's the deal. He's going from one of the most creative defensive schemes in the entire league. The Panthers have their deficiencies, but they used him damn well, to now, I think, inarguably the least creative defensive scheme in the league. And his production, to me, is often a direct correlation with how well you can scheme up stunts. And this team blitzed less than everybody and stunted less than everybody. So he could suck here. He could legitimately be a guy that has 400 pass rush snaps because of his pay grade and end up with 20 pressures and 7 sacks and grade out really poorly and actually make this pass rush worse than what they were getting from Ryan Kerrigan. I guess that makes me a Hassan Reddick hater, but it's just what's backed up by the film and the analytics, and where he's been most productive is when he's used in creative ways. So I didn't like the signing, especially given how they played defense last year, unless it means they're going to get more creative, which is a must here. So I will say that, but I like the rest of the depth on the edge. Brandon Graham, hard to know exactly what you're going to get from him. And if he's just as good as he was in 2020, he's going to shatter this grade of 80. He's going to be their best edge rusher. The last time he played a full season, he was still really freaking good. Borderline number 1 guy with like 60 pressures. I love Brandon Graham. He's 34 years old, coming off a serious injury. We just don't know what we're going to get from him. They don't know what they're going to get from him. And honestly, if he gets cut and kind of flames out, I don't think it happens, but it could. It's just tough at that age to recover. Derek Barnett behind him. We'll talk also about the run defense later, and he's going to play a big role there. But with all these other pieces, especially if Brandon Graham's out there, you like what he can do as kind of a rotational number 4 guy for sure. Hasn't been what myself and a lot of people hoped he would be as a first-round player, but a reminder that physical traits are really important, and he just doesn't have speed or a lot of bend, and it's hard for him to consistently win. But he's got a nice spin move and good technique. He can win. It's just not ultra consistent. Teron Jackson had a nice rookie year as well as a rotational piece. So at the end of the day, he's a 4th edge, but he's a nice guy to have, and he's their 5th here. Patrick Johnson behind him, probably going to be competing for a roster spot with Kyron Johnson. Patrick, they kind of played around with him as an off-ball guy last year because they needed help at that position, and that's not his role. I liked him coming out as a guy with a lot of different pass rush moves, so I'm not going to write him off quite yet. But they also draft Kyron Johnson, who's this literally a Hassan Reddick mini clone. He's ultra fast, was a undersized pass rushing hybrid edge in college. Sound familiar? That was Hassan Reddick coming out. So Kyron will be kind of put in the Hassan Reddick role. The acquisition of him and Hassan Reddick does at least make me a little bit optimistic that they will be running more stunts and creative fronts to scheme up some more pressure and make things easier on these guys, because the freaking roster talent's there for this to be a top 5 pass rush, but they need to unleash these guys. So really good edge group, clearly, and the interior defensive line group's even better. So you've got Javon Hargrave, who had probably his best season last year, 60-plus pressures, and was just getting after it, man. He really wins with quickness and extremely rapid, strong hands. He gets leverage very quickly, good get-off. And the threat of him changing lanes, swiping your hands away, ripping through you, can allow him to get under your pads and win with power as well. So a really consistent, effective pass rusher. I would say a top 10 pass rushing defensive tackle. Fletcher Cox on the way down, on the wrong side of 30 at this point, and has had yearly regression. They kind of had to rework his contract, and he decided to come back after they actually released him. So quite clearly trending downwards, but he's still, 80% of the old Fletcher Cox, and that's better than most defensive tackles in the league. And he's going to be an excellent mentor here for Jordan Davis, for Milton Williams, who are going to allow Fletcher to have a reduced snap count, a reduced role on this team, and stay fresh. And maybe you do get a more efficient version of Fletcher Cox when he's asked to play a little bit less. But I love the Jordan Davis pick in the first round. Quite clearly, Fletcher Cox probably on his last year here. Jordan Davis is a day 1 run defender, and we'll see how he looks in run defense. It's nice, but really no idea what he's doing as a pass rusher, similar to the Trayvon Walker conversation, where he's got all the tools. He's got get off, he's this crazy athlete, has, in theory, long arms, and should be a powerful pocket-pushing rusher in the same likes of like a Vita Vea. But Georgia just didn't ask him to do it. They often took him off the field on 3rd down. So he might have a learning curve as a pass rusher, but I like his upside as a rusher, and getting to learn from Fletcher Cox is about as good as it gets. Milton Williams is like a mini Javon Hargrave, where he's a little bit on the, I don't want to say lighter size for Javon Hargrave, but more of a guy that his threat of quickness and ability to change lanes and get leverage is what is ultimately their biggest threat. And then you can build other stuff off of keeping guards on their back heels, so to speak. And Milton Williams is a really special athlete. Love his development track. Got better in year 1. I don't even know how much of an impact he was going to make as a small school guy who played a lot more edge in college than he did interior. Is a true interior piece here, but his upside, I don't know if there's ever honestly been a more high upside combination of defensive tackles than Milton Williams and Jordan Davis, just from an athletic perspective. These are 2 of the most athletic defensive tackles ever, and they're together, developing in dream situations with great mentors and similar skill sets. I just love how this team builds a roster. You've even got some notable depth behind those guys. Marlon Tuipulotu, Was a decent pass rusher at USC, declared as a young guy, didn't do much in his rookie year. Marvin Wilson, a lot of people liked him coming out. I wasn't big on him. He goes undrafted, but a big dude, former 5-star, I believe. Renell Wren, big dude with some athleticism, sensing a theme here. Noah Ellis, really interesting undrafted pickup. I did have a draftable grade on him. He may have been in my top 10 defensive tackles. If not, he was close. I think I had him as a 5th-round guy, massive guy, tested well, played well at a small level of competition. I would keep him over at least Renell Wren and just get him on the Jordan Davis development plan, and you might have a great backup nose tackle down the road. So I like that pickup quite a lot. So all of this puts out the 9th-ranked pass rush. Really nice unit. And then you get more into the coverage conversation, starting with the linebackers. Love the Kaiser White signing, especially for a team that struggled, at least with Alex Singleton's coverage last year. I didn't hate TJ Edwards, honestly. But Edwards much better moving forward than he is moving backwards. Kaiser White, a little bit of the opposite. White's a former safety, great instincts, has been pretty consistent, and might even have some better football ahead of him in a different system. But love that addition. They get him for nothing. Was one of the best value signings of the offseason, honestly. 1 year, $4 million. Like, man, that's a steal. They, of course, add Nakobe Dean, but I don't think they'll go with Dean and White. That's a bit of a tiny linebacking group. Dean also kind of recovering from some injury stuff, and honestly, as I talked about pre-draft, was a bit of an overrated prospect. He's an undersized linebacker who can't really defend the run, benefited from playing behind one of the best defensive tackle combinations in the history of college football, getting clear lanes to run and chase and play fast. And honestly, doesn't have the best speed for a smaller guy. I think if he did run, it would have been in the 4.6s. So I did think he was overrated. I actually had a 2nd to a 3rd round grade, and viewers of this channel weren't stunned to see him fall. There was some injury stuff in there as well, but I've also heard NFL scouts say, yeah, he was a 3rd round guy with or without injuries. Not that it's a bad pick. 2nd, 3rd round grade on him. They get him in the middle of the 3rd round. I love that pick. And he gets a year to develop behind Kaiser White. So I love that pick, and with White on a 1-year deal, again, great roster building, stealing value, and putting guys in a position to develop behind similar skill sets so that when White plays well, you don't have to overpay him. You got Nakobe Dean with 3 years on a cheap rookie deal. It's just, Howie Roseman is a master class. I actually think TJ Edwards has a kind of different position, a different role here, with more of that Mike, a guy that's a really nice run defender, and an instinctive player. Not a great athlete, but he is the one with the size in this group. Most of these linebackers don't have 240 pounds on him to play between the tackles and make that impact on run defense. Edwards a good blitzer, and honestly good kind of reading the quarterback's eyes, playing shorter zones, keeping everything in front of him, coming downhill. I think he's an underrated player. He's just not a great athlete. Was undrafted for a reason. But that's why you have Kaiser White. That's why you bring in Nakobe Dean. Well, you have Davian Taylor and Sean Bradley and Jacoby Stevens, all these athletic project types. But I do think TJ Edwards holds on to starting playing time. He's a really smart, effective middle linebacker. He just has his limitations that they're building around here. So I like this linebacker group. Going to be much improved from what they were last year. They rank 17th there, and then I've got them 11th for defensive backs. I think this is a top 3 cornerback duo in the league with Darius Slay, who going to be 32 years old this year, but had a really nice year last year. He's always been really comfortable in zone coverages. For a guy that's such a smooth athlete, doesn't always get discussed how heady and consistent he is playing cover 3, and they ran a lot of that here. So was very comfortable here. And then James Bradbury on the other side, also a guy that's been much better in zone. Had his best year in 2020 for the New York Giants, who ran more cover 3 than anybody. Great scheme fits, are going to be comfortable in zone. And again, I think a top 3 cornerback duo. Both guys on the back 9 of their career, but still playing some of their best football. So you love that. Beyond that, it's a little bit less exciting. I do like Avonte Maddox. I love his athleticism. He makes flash plays that just blow your mind. How quickly he can close space and the makeup speed, especially covering curl routes, flipping his hips and coming back downhill, or corner routes where he can adjust and get to the sideline in a hurry. It helps him make up for some of his lack of anticipation and technique, and that's stuff that he can get better at. Just got a contract extension, and I think he's one of the 10 best slot corners in the league. But there's some stuff as far as anticipating some of those routes, and squeezing the distance between him and those receivers at the breaking point that I do think he can improve upon. And honestly, a lot of that is coaching. And they put him in a lot of weird kind of pre-snap positions where he had bad leverage. So he's not a perfect slot corner, but he's really good. Where you are concerned about this secondary is going to be the safety position. And you'd rather have good corners and average safeties than the other way around. But I do think these guys, let's just say, have a reduced range given the amount of cover 2 and cover 3 they're going to be running and rotating at. Those seam shots and those hole shots and those deep digs, that's going to be the part of the field that these safeties just aren't going to be able to get to in a hurry. Beyond that, like, these guys are heady players. Both Anthony Harris, Marcus Epps, both can play free, both can play strong, pretty interchangeable players, and both like decent starters. So I don't think you're throwing liabilities out there. You're just not throwing any like uber athletes or big game changers out there. I do think Epps wins this job ahead of Jaquiski Tart, who they signed from the Niners after he blew their chance at a Super Bowl by dropping one of the easiest interceptions you'll ever see. We'll see if he can mentally recover from that. That can weigh on you. But even then, I've gone at it with Niners fans saying he's kind of overrated, that they were going to be letting him go. They disagreed. And here he is competing with Marcus Epps for a starting job after signing a basically league minimum veteran contract. Good signing. Got a lot of playing time, size, and speed, but I actually think Marcus Epps is a slightly better safety. Either way, though, I don't think you're getting bad safety play or good safety play. Just kind of right in the middle there. As far as the defensive back depth is concerned, really just a lot of young developmental guys that you don't want to lean on. We didn't get to see a lot of these guys because, believe it or not, Darius Slay, all these corners had essentially a perfect bill of health last year. So we had very minimal sample size on Zach McPherson, who played pretty well. He is a heady, zone-heavy guy coming out of Texas Tech, so I like the scheme fit there. He might have potential to continue to grow, especially in a zone-heavy scheme, not a great athlete. And then, Tay Gowan, Josiah Scott, Kerry Vincent. I think I like these guys as developmental prospects. They all have upside in their own right, Scott being more of a slot guy. And I honestly don't mind them as 5th, 6th corners that maybe they surprise, but just continue to work on their technique and get better. Maybe those guys can develop into long-term starters. There are some other notable free agents here not listed, so they picked up a couple of more like big-name guys, but guys that I was actually really low on. They got Josh Jobe out of Alabama, who I have literally never watched a corner that cheats as much as he did at Alabama. Now, I did have a draftable grade on him because he started a bunch of years at Alabama and production-wise was fine. So, you should probably draft that guy at 6th, 7th round. But I literally wrote in his eval that should be, at his best as a special teamer and immediate depth who you just hope doesn't get flagged while he's out there because, in theory, he can cover pretty well when he is literally cheating on every single play. They can't throw a flag on every play. So, you might as well throw him out there if you have an injury and just hope that the ref he doesn't have great vision or doesn't like to throw a lot of flags. Because in theory, he covers well, but he cheats every single play. That's Josh Jobe. And then Mario Goodrich also started a bunch of games for Clemson, but just wasn't good. So, gets a lot of, credit for playing on a good Clemson defense. Started national championship game, I think, but was never consistent or anything. So, a couple of bigger name undrafted free agent pickups for them at corner. And then for the safety depth, Kayvon Wallace, still waiting on him to kind of show a little bit more. Minimal playing time last year. Again, the safeties stayed pretty healthy too. But he's got some theoretical upside, a 4th round pick out of Clemson. Not really a whole lot behind him. Reed Blankenship, an interesting kind of balanced safety who might make this team. We'll see. But yeah, there's your pass defense. Again, ranks 19th. It's a pretty dang good roster. Safeties aren't amazing, but overall, it's just a group, as I've said, held back by what's going to be the 31st ranked defensive coaching staff in the league that genuinely pisses me off that they don't do more with these guys because their upside's phenomenal. And then we'll rip through the run defense here where they also ranked 19th. No surprise, the D-line, top 10. Jordan Davis, I do think, plays starting reps as an early down run defender. His impact grade as strictly a run defender is higher than any grade I gave out for any position in this class. Like, if I had to bet on any one thing in this draft happening, it is that Jordan Davis is a really freaking good nose tackle or 3 technique, wherever you want to play him. It doesn't matter. He's so athletic. I would bet that he would do it right away. And I'm putting that to paper here, giving him a grade as a stud run defender as a rookie, and I think he's only going to get better. So that's the highlight of the run defense, honestly, is you add him into the mix. And it allows you to take Javon Hargrave off the field, who is actually a really bad run defender because he's kind of just a gap shooter and really doesn't play with a lot of discipline at all. But that's fine. You can just put Hargrave out there on third down, second and long, let him do his thing, and let Jordan Davis dominate up front while he works on his pass rushing. Fletcher Cox, I do think, plays a larger role as a run defender. I think he was a little bit better in run defense than he was as a pass rusher last year, actually, despite what the PFF grades will tell you. He actually graded out quite poor in run defense. I didn't see it. I still see a guy that can hold his own, really instinctive to find the ball carrier, shed blocks, and in a role where he's not asked to do quite as much as a pass rusher, because I do think Milton Williams will rotate Cox out on third downs, at least maybe half the time. Cox will have more fresh legs and more energy to defend the run, perhaps. So I still think he's good, but of course is trending downwards. It's a really nice duo. Between Hargrave and Milton Williams, I see these as third down pass rush types. Both guys struggle against the run. I do think Milton Williams played better as the year went on, but I don't know if that's ever going to be a strength. You do have some really nice kind of rotational depth, though. I think all of these guys, Tui Pelotu, Marvin Wilson, Noah Ellis, maybe not so much Reno Wren, but they all can be kind of that good third or fourth defensive tackle types that give you quality run defense. They just are not proven in that area. On the edge, it's a solid group. Josh Sweat is a little more slender, so he can get pushed around, but he'll also use his quickness to get off blocks as well, and his length to reach out and bring down ball carriers. Derek Barnett is a beefy dude, and he holds up really well against the run. I think that's why they brought him back, honestly. He's a decent pass rusher, but he adds a lot of value on early downs where you don't have to lean into Hassan Reddick, who's also really light. For a team that's more of a 4-3 front, that's not Hassan Reddick's game. So Derek Barnett's a great compliment there. Brandon Graham, in theory, if they asked him to defend the run, would be really good at it. But at 34, I don't know if they want him more as a pass rush specialist or if they want him to defend the run. That'll be up for them to determine. But Teron Jackson, 6'2", 260, really rocked up dude, brings that energy on run defense. I think that's why he beat out Patrick Johnson last year. Johnson, who is more of a finesse rusher type of guy. But yeah, you're deep on the edge group for sure. So again, 8th for D-line run defense. The linebackers rank 15th. I love what TJ Edwards does. Really good at diagnosing runs, not afraid to get dirty, has the size, a good tackler. Yet again, I will repeat, I do not think it's Kaiser White and Nakobe Dean. I think if Dean's going to get out there, it's going to take either an injury or for him to straight up beat out Kaiser White, which I do not think is likely in the first year. So like what you're getting from TJ Edwards. Kaiser White also actually, for a converted safety, holds up pretty well against the run. He played middle linebacker in the Chargers 3-4 defense and honestly held up. So I'm not even worried about him, especially with TJ Edwards next to him. Neither of these guys are stars, but they'll get the job done for sure. Where they get knocked, however, is the DB run support. So this makes up 10% of the run defense grade, and they rank 29th there. Maddox is really slender, much more of a cover slot. He has really improved his tackling, so you like that. I don't think he sucks, but he's not an impact. Both these corners as well have really not been great run defenders. I think it's a lack of effort. 2 veteran guys that are disinterested, would rather stay healthy, and I can't say I blame them, but when you go against outside zone run teams, I think you can get these guys. And then these safeties, neither are really enforcers either. I think both are solid tacklers, decent coming downhill, but neither really the size to play box safety and thump. That is where Jaquiski Tartt will come into play. And maybe they have a little bit of a safety by committee where Tartt's more of an early down guy and they bring in Epps. That's something that could work. Epps actually a much more consistent tackler though, so I do grade him out better. It's just like role-wise, Tartt can do a little bit more, if that makes sense, whereas Epps is under 200 pounds, so depending on what kind of defenses they want to run, Tartt could, in theory, be a more effective run defender. I know it's confusing because Tartt has a lower grade than Epps does there. Let's just say Epps is better at what he's asked to do than Tartt is at what he's asked to do. And as far as the depth goes, on the back end, really across the board, there's no one stepping in other than Jaquiski Tartt that I think is anything other than replacement level or worse. The only guy really would be like Jimmy Moreland, if he even makes the team, is in theory a good slot corner, or if you gonna go way down like Josh Jobe, who's a really good run defender at Alabama, physical guy, but again, I don't really like him. So there is your run defense, ranking 19th because of a lack of back end support and a defensive coaching staff that I just don't really trust to fire this squad up. I don't think they're going to suck against the run. The gap between them and maybe our 12th or 13th run defense is pretty minor, but it's far from a perfect group. We'll just leave it at that. So you actually end up 19th in both pass defense and run defense, which actually spits out the 20th grade overall for defense. But I think it's a middling defense that, if the coaching staff can get more creative and get more out of these guys, it can be a top half defense for sure, if not top 10. Like, you can easily see a world where this is a top 10 secondary with these corners, rank them 11th, and maybe like a top 5 pass rush if they can really unlock Reddick and get these guys to develop and scheme these guys up a little bit more. The potential is certainly there for this defense to exceed 20th, but I think I got some pretty fair questions here about this staff, most notably. So, overall, 16th offense, 20th defense, puts you at 17. Right on the cusp of playoff boundaries, I suppose. They are also 17th for special teams, where their kicking game and coverage is just all around good. So, what does this all mean? What am I predicting for this team? Well, let's take a look at the schedule. And Vegas has them at 9.5 wins on their over-under, which is certainly up there. That means the market is in on the Eagles, and honestly, perhaps they are treating last year's record as real. I think they were probably more of a 5 or 6 win team last year. They got to 9 wins. So that means they have to get significantly better as a football team to go over. And I think they did get significantly better as a football team, but that's still pretty lofty. I actually have them coming out right there, 9.6 wins. Their schedule this year, again, is not all that tough. They do play their own division, where I think every game's winnable. Some of them they should win. They got the Giants twice, they got Washington twice, and I think even Dallas is getting worse. So that gap, I think, is closing. And then you get the NFC North. So you got the Lions, you got the Bears, you have the Vikings, who this team ranks ahead of. All winnable games. So those are like 9, should be pretty competitive winnable games just right there. And then you get the AFC South. So you basically get free wins with the Texans and the Jags, or at least you should. Not a guarantee, though. Those teams are much better than they were last year. So if they win the games they're supposed to win, which to me are the Jags, Texans, Washington at home, the Giants at home, and at the Giants and at the Bears, that gives you 6. Then you basically got to split all of your other difficult games where I think they're pretty much 50-50. Because I don't think they go on the road and beat the Colts, and I don't think they beat the Packers. They can, but I don't think they do it. So it's going to be really close. I really do. It's going to be really close. I really do think that. I think they're right between 9 and 10 wins. I obviously have my reservations about Jalen Hurts. Doubt that he can be a franchise quarterback, but can he get a little bit better, become an adequate, 24th best quarterback in the league? Not crazy to think that he can take that jump, especially with all the help around him. Maybe the defensive coaching staff gets a little bit more creative and you end up with 10 wins and maybe you do win the division. I'm still pretty skeptical that this can be a Super Bowl team, which I have actually heard some people throw that word out with the Eagles. I can't go that far, not with Jalen Hurts at quarterback, not based on what we know from him and not what we know about this defensive coaching staff. But it is a pretty special roster, and it is kind of frustrating that maybe a couple people are holding them back a little bit. But man, this team has ascended as well from how we were at with this team last year. So there is your Eagles deep dive. I really hope you did enjoy. If you're still here and you haven't hit that like button yet, really be a big favor for me. Definitely comment as well what you think. Too high, too low for this team, just right. What are your expectations for Jalen Hurts this year? Will he be the Eagles starter in 2023? Let me know all of that down below, and we'll see you the next deep dive. Peace out.